time. My journey to putting this programming together was back in mid-March when Trump actually started being quoted calling coronavirus the Chinese virus. I started following this company called NextShark. It's an editorial platform that speaks specifically about issues for Asian Americans. And I learned, got a little bit more educated, got exposed to some of the hate crimes that are happening around our country. And then I obviously turned to the MCBA, Minority Cannabis Business Association, and I was kind of looking for what is their stance? Have they done a post about it? Are they reporting about it? And I noticed that there wasn't much content there about the Asian American experience for cannabis at that time. And I was kind of curious as to why. So I have no shame, and I went ahead and I reached out, and I was so warmly welcomed by the MCBA, and they actually encouraged me to put together a bigger event to create this conversation, because they specifically said, we know that this is happening, we know that it's a problem, and we've been actively looking for someone in the cannabis industry to like raise their hand and introduce this conversation. And Jasmine, one of the like chairwoman of the organization, she was like, if that's you, please raise your hand. And I was like, I'm happy to do it. I'm not an activist. I'm not an Asian American activist by any means. I'm like fifth or sixth generation, born and raised in Hawaii. So I don't know that I'm like the right person to do it, but I'm happy to put the call to action out there. It'd be my honor. And so with that, they introduced me and connected me with you. And you and I had an amazing conversation about this exact topic. So with that, that's sort of like our backstory, you and me. And I would love for you to introduce yourself and maybe tell us a little bit about your experience as an Asian American in cannabis.
Yeah, sure. Awesome. And thank you so much, Michelle, for reaching out to the MCBA and me and kind of quarterbacking all this thing. And hi, everybody. As Michelle mentioned, I am Raj Chander. I am a cannabis writer, marketer, journalist. Recently joined the marketing committee of the MCBA, and which is a Minority Cannabis Business Association. And yeah, I mean, to your point, Michelle, at the MCBA, we had definitely been, considering the Asian American voice in cannabis. It's something that was on our radar, and we are obviously a group that likes to facilitate community and cohesive work between groups. So, I know that when Rue and Jasmine on the board heard about your efforts, they were immediately like, yes, we got to run with it. So we're super excited to be involved. And me personally, I am super excited to be representing the MCBA and be a part of this awesome conversation with my fellow Asian American leaders in cannabis.
Thanks. Welcome. So maybe, Ophelia, if I can just go ahead and pivot over to you to speak specifically about the experience as an Asian American in cannabis, because I know you've just been such a critical part of me even being able to step into this space in any meaningful way. And I know I've researched your story behind creating Asian Americans for Cannabis Education, but from that, maybe from that lens and from that perspective, I would love to hear what your thoughts are on the evolution of the Asian American experience in cannabis from your journey.
Well, Sabo down there, you can turn your mic on too, because I want you part of this conversation. He and I both know that it is walking into a room, and also Raj would know this too, is that it's walking into a room full of marshmallows, right? There's all these marshmallows everywhere. And what you're looking for is that little raisin, right? You're looking around, it's like, where's another one that looks like me? And then finally, when you find someone that looks like you, and I found Sabo down there, that guy, you can say hi, Sabo. Can you unmute? Because it's a fun story how we met. So we were up in San Francisco, and there's a bunch of us that went up to the room, and he gave me my first baby dab, right? Which was really nice. He was very kind. He gave me the smallest one, but that friendship started because he looked like me and I looked like him, and we had the shared experiences. There's a shorthand already of what we were encountering in cannabis, but also in life in general as Asian Americans, because he was also in college studied Asian American history and culture. So we had a really tight bond there, and that bond and that shared experience, we needed to bring it out forward to other Asian Americans and to share what we're doing in cannabis, which is how Asian Americans for Cannabis Education started. It was to share my experience and Sabo's experience and all these other people about what it's like to be Asian American in cannabis, because there's a lot of stigma within our own community, right? And plus, since I'm going to bring this up, there's also racism within our own community too, outward and inward, and it's not right. It's something that sometimes is brought over. Sometimes it's bred here, but that's also something that we need to educate people about too, that it's wrong, right? It's not only wrong to stigmatize people of cannabis, but also other people of color. I mean, it's almost ironic, but Sabo, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think understand, like when I first met you, obviously it was kind of like the first day of high school where you're like, oh man, do I know anyone from middle school here? Like, and then when you see another Asian person, it's quite rare. And I've actually have a few Asian friends in the industry. They're growers, and some of them actually have some technology applications. And believe it or not, like their parents don't know what they actually do, so it's very frustrating to meet other Asians in the industry where they can't be like vocal about what they're doing. And when I met Ophelia, she was very vocal about it and very unapologetic. And for myself, I was always one of those guys that I learned very quickly how to fit in. Like when I was with a certain crowd of people, like I would always hear like negative jokes about Asians or whatever, but I just kind of knew like how to maybe do like some self-deprecating humor or whatever it would be required to kind of fit in with the in-group. And, it's kind of interesting because as we've watched this industry mature, like in the beginning, I've been selling vaporizers since 1997, which is, quite some time, I guess. How long is that? 23 years now. And, a lot of my friends, when we started off selling, they were all people of color. And then it was weird when I started going to these cannabis conferences, I was like, wow, these things are very, very homogenous. And, I never really felt out of place, just mainly because, like I said, it was easy for me to just kind of like fit in and just act appropriate way. But many times, like I think I fit in a little bit too well, where people forgot that I was Asian. And then they would make some like snide Asian jokes around me and then go, oops, I forgot you were Asian, and those were the types of things where I was like really thinking, oh man, like, these guys are like really nice to me when I'm in the room, but what do they say, when I leave the room? And, like, I really hate having like thoughts like that, like go through my mind. I like to just take people at face value, but, just kind of seeing how the industry was, it was very comforting to see someone like Ophelia. And what I really loved about Ophelia is how outspoken she is, how unapologetic she is for her opinions, because, even for myself, I found myself, censoring myself because I knew that Asian CEOs weren't that common. And like being an outspoken Asian CEO, like, sometimes it's been to my benefit, but, like I could see like it was a archetype that a lot of people weren't used to as well. Like most of the executives that I worked with in the high tech space, they were like CTOs or, something more in a technical capacity versus a leadership capacity. So I really, bonded with Ophelia, and yeah, I'm so happy I was the first person to give her her first baby dad.
One last thing before you ask, we bring Raj in. Hey, Keiko. The most irritating thing about being Asian in this is having on the last name Chong, because though many times I've had emails, hey, yeah, I saw you at so-and-so, and yeah, you're really great, and hey, can I talk to your uncle, dad, or cousin, right? And I said, you want to talk to my dad, my George? You want to talk to George Chong? He said, no, we want to talk to Tommy. And it's like this, like, poof. I said, no, just because I have the same last name and there's probably a million of us doesn't mean we're related. So, dude, it's just step back. So that was the only other pet peeve, is because I was Asian. I had the same last name as Tommy Chong. I even put it on my card, not related to Tommy. So that was also stereotypical. So, hey, Keiko. Hey, Raj.
That's too
I
funny.
love it. I love it. Keiko, I'm so glad that you're here. I missed getting to introduce you while you're here. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? And also, if you can make a quick comment about your experience as an OG in this space, and specifically through the lens of being an Asian American in cannabis.
Unmute yourself.
There you go.
Okay. Hello, my brothers and sisters of other Asian mothers and fathers. Great to be here. I do apologize. I was on a very important call and I kept on wanting to get off and not be rude, but there I was rude to you guys. Yes. And you know, Asians aren't rude, are they? Yes. How many times have I experienced somebody thinking just because there's two Asians in a room, we must be related? Anyway, I've been in the industry for a while. I started studying Ayurvedic Chinese holistic medicine back in the 70s, maybe before some of you were born. But I always saw how it was a natural plant-based medicine. And I had grown up with my father using moxie herbs, and I was cupping him by the time I was 10. And I also did a lot of massage on him, but little did I know, having to massage his neck and his knee, I didn't know that was child labor. But that was an Asian household for me. And we were very conservative, grew up that way, Republican conservative. And I don't know what happened to me, but I'm okay about it. I definitely started finding the values of cannabis medicine when I was in high school. And there weren't very many Asians around, but I always thought, you know, the cooler people were the ones who were utilizing that plant-based medicine. It made me feel good. And I never drank alcohol, smoked cigarettes, or taken any pharmaceutical drugs, but for the plant, I related to it. And it was a comfort level for me. And I felt comfort in everybody who I connected with, but I always felt I had to keep it a secret from my Asian friends and Asian relatives. But through the years, I studied and I learned more about it through Bach flower and homeopathics, but I still kept it hidden and I always felt like I was a criminal. But through the years, I started slowly coming out and being more open about it, and knew that we needed much more education. I wanted to be able to see that patients had access to their medicine. And it brought me through a lot of trials and tribulations and many different experiences. And being an Asian, I always felt like I'd look around and there wouldn't be any other Asians. So I had to feel more comfortable in my own skin, no matter where I was at and who else was around. But I knew when I would see other Asians, like seeing Ophelia around, I felt like, yeah, a great sisterhood, a great understanding that we are Asian and we are part of the community. And just like I would accept anyone else, no matter what color or nationality or religion they were, if we were all around the plant and access of cannabis, that was our new tribe. That was our new understanding. So I really felt that that relationship with cannabis really held us through and moving forward within this industry. But still, it's a very small industry. And I feel like there's not a lot of Japanese in this industry, the cannabis industry. Michelle, are you Japanese?
I'm Chinese, Japanese, Hawaiian.
Oh, okay. There you go. Well, see, there's a great blend there. I actually got my son into it too. Now I wasn't a very good mommy, was I? But we now have a farm in Southern Oregon and 3 dispensaries in Oklahoma. And for me, I've written for everybody from Weed Maps, Marijuana.com, Sensi, and had an edible company. And now I focus a lot on education because I really want to see that this plant is accessible to patients. And, there have been many times where I I do, just like Sabo was saying, you forget that you're Asian when you were with other people in the industry, but then all of a sudden you realize you are Asian and you are different and you do look different from everyone else. So we have to find our comfort level and find our comfort level with a type of mutual respect. And I figure if I respect you, you'll respect me in my place. And I think because I'm a bona fide senior and I've been in it a few years, I feel that I've earned and gained certain respect, but I really want to help nurture anyone new who's coming into this space, anyone new who wants to be a part of it, because it's a great community. And I feel that we have a very good voice in being able to share that all ethnicities can be a part of this, be successful, reach out, and be able to maybe pass it to the left-hand side to a good friend, no matter what color they are.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's amazing. It's amazing. I love that
So great.
reference.
Can I just piggyback on one thing, Michelle, that Keiko mentioned?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
what really stuck out to me was what you mentioned about, finding a place through the plant and connecting with people. Like, for me, I am somebody that I was born in New Jersey, and then I moved to where there's a significant Asian and Indian population, for those who aren't familiar. And then I moved down to Southern Virginia right when I was 13, like right before high school, where there is not a significant Asian population. And then you combine that with the fact that I'm someone with brown skin who was there about 2 years after September 11th happened. So again, it's a difficult recipe, right? And I was a shy kid regardless. So, there was a lot of World of Warcraft, let's put it that way, after school. I didn't really have a ton of friends. I felt like I didn't fit in. There wasn't, Keiko and Sable, like you guys were talking about, there wasn't people that looked like me in the room. And then I remember my junior year, I fell into a group of people that happened to smoke. And I was like, whoa, like these guys are cool. And like, also this stuff makes me feel great. And people are hanging out with me and talking to me. Let's do this more, so that I totally related to what you said, because that was how yes, I enjoyed the plant and the effects of it and everything, but a big part of it for me as a young person was finding my place in a society where I didn't really feel accepted prior to being somebody that used regularly. So definitely agree with you on that point.
Can I actually piggyback, Raj, on
Yeah.
that story? Because Keiko said something really incredible, and Ophelia also mentioned something that I think you can speak really intelligently about. Ophelia talked about hierarchy within the Asian community. Keiko talked about criminalization of cannabis then and now. And I know that you're open about this part of your story. So I wanted to take this moment to invite you to tell your specific story about incarceration because of cannabis and what that experience was like for you. And also the hierarchy of Asians. I wanted to tie all of that together, the hierarchy of the different types of Asian, the fact that you are part Asian, part white, like kind of sharing all of that of your narrative.
Yeah, sure. And that's something that, I think Keiko touched on in the beginning, but just, to step back a little bit and talk about my personal narrative. As you mentioned, Michelle, I am somebody that was arrested for possession of cannabis, ended up actually spending some time in jail for possession of cannabis. It's the typical like a probation thing, but I had a couple other things that happened while I was on the probation, and the judge that I ended up getting, it was like a circumstantial criminal justice story that happy to tell anybody if you want to hit me up after. But the long and short of it is I did serve time in jail for possession of cannabis. At the time it was very difficult for myself and my family. But now I look at it as something that has really given me a very unique insight into what it's like on the inside of the criminal justice system. I mean, the literal inside of it, right? So it's given me a sense of like really being in it and seeing what people go through, and seeing the kind of things that people, the kinds of ways that people are treated just for possessing the same plant that in other parts of the country people are getting 8 and 9 figure buyouts and stock options and all this stuff for. So that, to me, I think it what was once a very traumatic event for me kind of helps keep me grounded and really connects me to this cause of cannabis, like the other panelists have mentioned. And then to your other point, Michelle, you talked about the hierarchy of minorities. I think, and my Asian brethren can totally speak on this, like we all compare within our groups, and we all have certain stereotypes of people that are a certain type of Asian or even a certain type of South Asian. That's just what we do. That's how we sort things and how we rank them. And so that is within our community. But then I would also say one of the most problematic things, and I'd love to open this up to other panelists as well, one of the most problematic things to me in recent times of the Asian and Asian American community and in relations to other minority communities, especially the Black community, was, of course, the Asian cop with George Floyd, right? Everybody's talking about that. As soon as I saw that, like my heart just dropped,
Yeah.
and so many people have brought that up. And I mean, that right there is like a visceral highlight. I mean, you can't find a more like visual proof of the fact that there's still so much work to do to bridge the gap between communities. So when you say, Michelle, the hierarchy of minorities, I think about it both within our groups and then for us within the greater minority community, because to me that just shows, seeing that cop just stand there just really shows that we have so much work to do.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think that's like a perfect segue into one of the next points that I wanted to ask Ophelia about, and her experience with being part of what nationwide were considered this model minority. And there's been a lot of conversation about model minority myth and what does that mean? And Ophelia, I would love if I could ask you what your relationship has been with that term.
It's about not raising our heads so that we don't get popped, right? It's but also it's cultural. If you go back into Asian culture, the Confucian it's a Confucius society, and if you look at that, it is the parents at the top, the children at the bottom, and then there's grandparents, and every generation looks after the generation above it. It's a multi-generational house where you have the grandparents, you have the parents, you have the children, the grandchildren. It's all about a communal family situation. But also Confucian philosophy is, if you steal a book, you'll go to hell. If you say something to your parents, you'll go to hell. If you do anything basically walking out of the lines, you're going to go to hell. So we've been raised on that in centuries about going to hell for doing anything that is out of the norm. Look at the Japanese society, right? So not that they're Confucian, but it's the same thing. So we brought that with us. It is respecting the elders, getting a job, working at it, making enough money so that you look at your grandparents, you can look after your great grandparents and whatever, and your children. So it's basically that is your focus. You are not there to think about what you want. You're there to think about what everyone wants. So doctors, attorneys, accountants, you do not veer from the norm. So that is what the white society saw Asians. They called us a model minority, right? Because of that Confucian thought, is that we have to make money to keep everyone in our homes, right? So that is where that came from. Also, we have in the late 1800s was the Chinese exclusion law, where we were allowed to come here and pay a $500 head tax, which probably in today's dollars is probably about 20,000, to come here to work, right? But also men were only allowed to come here to work. You cannot bring women, you couldn't have big families. So basically we're told to go back to our own countries after we finished our work. That law did not come down until after World War II. So then that's fairly recent, right? And then when it came down, everyone brought their families, but we didn't want to go out of the norm. So we stayed within that model minority box. So that's how that happened. With cannabis, we came out of that box because, oh my God, you're going to be a drug dealer. You're going to live on the streets. Who's going to look after me? It's all this. And until recently, it started turning because we could make money from it, right? That's what turned it. It wasn't because it was a medicine. It wasn't a plant, you know, it's all that great stuff. It's because, oh, look, we can make some dimes, you know, we can make some profit out of that. That's where it turned. And so for Savo's parents, it was him educating his parents on what a vaporizer is, right? And Keiko educating fellow Asians on how it is not a drug, it is medicine. And for Raj, we're going to talk about your time in jail, but it's educating your parents where you are now, right? And how you're trying to help other people. So it's trying to turn that curve because it's very NIMBY. There's a lot of fresh off the boat Asians who do not want that in their neighborhood because of the smell. It's gonna what about the children? That's basically the thing is what about the kids? The thing is, girlfriend, your kids are smoking it. So really, get over it and just learn about it. All
Yeah,
right.
that's so true. Michelle, that reminds me of the conversation that you and I had in the pre-chat about like building the system versus, you know, working in the system versus changing. I don't know if you want to expound on that a little bit, but what Ophelia, what you said reminds me exactly of what we were talking about.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad that you mentioned it. And Ophelia, thank you so much for sharing your experience. Savo, do you mind maybe sharing just in your experience what the term model minority myth has sort of like meant for you or against you, or what your relationship is with that term?
Yeah, you know, it's actually one of the few things that I really remember from college, you know, was when we learned about the model minority myth. And it's even more insidious than what Ophelia was talking about, because after the civil rights movement, it actually opened up a second wave of immigrants for Asian immigrants to come into the country. And the vast majority of these immigrants had postgraduate degrees. So, you know, and this is why when you look at like the average median income for Asian American households, you know, it skews even higher than Caucasians. Well, it's because this last wave of Asians came with like, you know, doctorate degrees and MBAs and things of that nature. And ultimately, you know, what the government saw was that like they could utilize this as a way to drive a wedge between people of color. You know, like the first wave of Asian immigrants came, as Ophelia said, you know, they couldn't come with women. A lot of the men were emasculated, and a lot of that is still prevalent today. You know, there's like all these like Asian small penis jokes, things of that nature. And, you know, these are like really tough things to get over when you're younger. But, you know, this whole model minority myth, you know, like I think I remember like my friends, like they wore it as a badge of honor, you know, like, hey, look, you know, we're the model minority, you know. And it was kind of funny to see them act that way, because, you know, being educated in it, I realized, oh, you know, what the government was basically, or the powers that be were basically utilizing this term for, was to show like, hey, look at these other Asians. They came with nothing, and look at them now. Everyone work as hard as the Asians, right? So basically it put a target on our back. Luckily, I was like a C+B- student. So, you know, I didn't really fall into that category. But, you know, the whole model minority thing, you know, like in other ways, as I said, you know, I was very good at being a chameleon and just fitting in, you know, like whether I was with my Caucasian friends, African friends, Latinx friends, you know, like I just, you know, just kind of knew like, you know, how to behave so that I could be part of that group. But ultimately,
Code
you know,
switching. Code switching. It's all about code switching.
Yep. Yep. And ultimately, you know, as I got older, just started becoming more comfortable with what being an Asian American is, who being myself is really, you know, and a lot of that self-discovery really helped. And, you know, for me, when I look at these issues now, you know, it's just like Raj said, you know, like seeing that Asian cop there, it was really difficult. And I don't know if you guys saw, but there was a bunch of Asian American um, fraternity students at NYU that got in trouble for saying all these, you know, negative things about African Americans. And basically, like there's like the if you look at, you know, crime rates against Asian Americans, you know, African Americans have the highest percentage against Asian Americans, and they were utilizing this statistic to say, well, why should we support Black Lives Matter when our group is targeted by African Americans? But, you know, it's a very simple, basic argument in my opinion. It's like, well, we know that individuals don't represent a group. Just like if a Caucasian person told me to go back to China, I don't think all Caucasian people are racist. I think that Caucasian person is racist. And that's one of the things that I really want to help delineate, especially for the younger Asian males out there that, you know, may have forgot about the civil rights movement and how much we actually benefited from the civil rights movement for that second wave of immigration. And yeah, just like Raj, you know, like when I saw that Asian officer, you know, like it just, like the feeling that I got in my stomach. And, you know, it actually didn't matter if he was Asian or not. Just knowing other officers were there and not doing anything. I mean, this is why, you know, typically like politics isn't like my core competency or a lane that I want to get into, but because, you know, Asian Americans are also at the center of this, especially with COVID as well, you know, I really wanted to, you know, express how I felt and hopefully, you know, build bridges versus building wedges.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I completely share in that sentiment. And I saw an incredible panel that Define America did, or Define American did. It was called the Black and Gold Forum, specifically to address that, what you were just talking about, Savo. So thank you for mentioning that. Keiko, I'm so curious for you, the journey of hearing things or experiencing things as part of Model Minority, and then you know, kind of your relationship and journey with maybe carrying or having that label surround you, especially as you've been such a pioneer specifically in the cannabis space, that, to Ophelia's point, kind of goes against the concept of staying in your box and being that model minority. But I'd love if you would share a little bit about that.
I always wanted to be good, but something else always inspired me to be a lot more expressive, so to say. So, you know, I definitely grew up knowing I needed to mind my P's and Q's, but sometimes I'd be more attracted to the X, Y's, and Z's. In growing up, I tried, and I knew that I needed to be a good daughter, a good Asian. Sometimes it always didn't work out. And I really relate to certain things, like within my own family. Here I have a niece who's a LAPD, a cousin who's a sheriff, and then yet my son has a farm and dispensaries. My nephew works for Herb, and my other niece makes infused wine. So it's a good blend. It's a good mix. But I don't want to say I was a rebel, but I definitely was going to the beat of a different drummer, and I felt much more comfortable being there. But then again, I would do other things that would try and help balance it out. I mean, when I was raising my son, we grew up in Laguna Beach. I was a PTA president. I was on the board for Little League. And for 25 years, I was a precinct inspector with the Orange County Register of Voters. And then on the other hand, I was doing all these experiments of making infused macaroni and cheese and giving it to somebody's grandmother so they wouldn't have pain. So it was a balance where I did want to fit the mold of the good Asian, but I knew deep down inside I was an individual first, and I was being led to do other things that meant more to me, and finding my harmony, my balance, and my respect for myself in life in this present time. And it is a balance. However we choose to walk our path, we need to be able to find what is going to create our harmony with ourselves mentally, spiritually, physically, And I always look now that I'm older, what I can do for humankind. And I really look at what's happening. I mean, I have definitely felt a lot of resentment with COVID-19 lately. I don't go out much, but I'm going out because I want to I'm not going out because I want to stay safe. But I don't want to also put myself in jeopardy of any ignorance of racism and prejudice either. So I'm being very wary and cautious and knowing that I deserve to be treated equally, just like everybody else. And even though I may look like an Asian, I'm still a human being first. And I want to respect others for that too. So no matter what we do, I'm not trying to be an example, but I do want to be able to feel comfortable in knowing that I have within me a part that wants to be a good Asian. And to some others, I may not be, but I'm going to be okay with that. I'm going to accept whatever slings and arrows come my way because I know inside I am attempting to live a good life with respect to others. And I think that's an important thing. I talk openly to my niece, who's the LAPD, and she knows everything that I do. And one time was on the cover of OC Weekly for the Women in Weed of Orange County. And I had a cousin who didn't know anything what I did. She texted me a picture of the cover of the magazine, and I texted back to her. I said, "You know, I was never a boring cousin." And so that we took it as that. So again, whatever I feel I can walk my path in respect to everybody is going to be a comfort to me of being a good Asian. And when I've been at cannabis events and I see another Asian there, I think now that's my cousin or my little brother or little sister or somebody. I mean, I do want to see us all come together and make sure that we have a space in the cannabis industry because there's not that many of us out there. And maybe it is because our other Asians were trying to be good Asians or nerds, right?
So true, so true. I'm so glad that you shared that story. I heard in an interview with Jane Elliott, she said, and she said this in many interviews, she says, God invented the human race and humans invented racism. So Raj, you're next. I want to hear a little bit about your experience with Model Minority and what that's done, what your experience has been throughout your life with maybe having to live under that umbrella or supporting that term.
Yeah, sure. So, I guess kind of what I had alluded to earlier was, the conversation that you and I had, Michelle, the other day, which I hope is okay if I kind of spill the beans on. But basically, we had talked about how, because I think you were the one that had asked, like, why is there so little voices? Like, why are there so few Asian voices in activism and pushing things forward and like changing things? And to me, my response was, as Asian people, and Keiko talked to this as well, we are told you get into the system and you excel in that system. You crush it within the system, but you stay in the system. You don't change the system. You don't try to rock the boat. You don't try to make new rules. You take the rules, you listen to the rules, you say, okay, you bow, which is associated with like Asian subservience for decades, and you stay with that within that system. And it's true in all different types of Asian communities. We are the kind that will, get into the system and do well and excel. If you give us the rules, we'll do well and we'll crush it and excel, and we'll be that model minority. That's what you're talking about. But when it comes to like expanding the system and broadening things out and getting people like us a seat at the table that designs the system, I think that's where we have more work to do. And I think that's where all of us are on the front lines of pushing that envelope forward. And I would love to see other people from all Asian communities get involved with that.
Yeah, and I think that actually introduces a perfect commentary around the Asian American experience in cannabis through quarantine and COVID. And Keiko, maybe I'll start with you because you talked about wanting to stay, safe at this time, right? Because of the increase in overall hate crimes towards Asian Americans and what this current moment in time has kind of done in raising those statistics. So maybe if you don't mind sharing like your experience with that.
I think I have to look at personal history. Both my parents were interned in American concentration camps, and they were born here. They were American citizens. And the irony was that many of my uncles were actually served in the 442nd, which was made up of all Japanese Americans. They fought in Europe in World War II, and they were writing home letters to their families who were in concentration camps here. I know they put a pretty bow on it and called it internment camps, but you had barbed wire and guns pointed at you, and they did kill people. And there was a lot of sexual abuse as well, but it's not talked about. They're the quiet Americans. And I feel that when COVID came out and I heard that people were attacking Asian people right on the street, doing heinous things, spitting at them, just knocking them down and making many racial slurs, I just thought, this can't be happening again. That Asians are being blamed for something that was not their fault. Asian Americans. And it was very disturbing to me. And, you know, I really felt how much ignorance there is out there. And it's unfortunate. And I'm sure some of us in Southern California have maybe seen in Torrance a woman who was attacking Asians with racial slurs there. Very disturbing. How many people aren't saying those things that feel that same way? I can't change ignorance, but what I can do is I can stand up, support all my humankind, no matter what race they are, and join hands together and finding a way that we can fight racism in a, you know, I think, well, what could I do personally? Gently be a good person. And in the cannabis industry, I do volunteer a lot. I mean, I'm on the board for NORML. I'm on the board for the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce. Yeah, I'm the only Asian there, but you know what? I feel I have a right to be there. I have a right to share my voice and show that I want to be part of this community and support it. And we've been all through the good, the bad, the evil, and hopefully we'll find much more good in the future for us. We can't change racism, but what we can do is we can support each other in finding a better place for us to be there in that community and in the industry. MJ BizCon is way too many white dudes in suits. There needs to be a lot more diversity and women and just all minorities. And I think we need to just stand up and walk in there and feel confident that we deserve to be there. So, you know, I'm reaching out to you all and watching today and all our amazing, great panelists on here. Let's all join hands and support each other as well as other races too, to bring this to a much more homogeneous society in the community and industry of cannabis.
I love your messaging around balance, mostly because every time you talk about it, I constantly think about the endocannabinoid system being the system for homeostasis. And I'm like, what? Obviously she's talking about that. Ophelia, I'm just curious for you, when coronavirus and quarantine kind of came down, how that was for you, because I see you as somebody who's had their finger on the pulse on Asian American experience in cannabis, because your website, right? Like, I feel like once it started happening, I'm making this assumption. I have no idea if this is true, but because you have such a strong network, I imagine that that was such a present conversation that perhaps you're having on an extremely regular basis, especially when we were, first seeing, to Keiko's point, the wave of hate crimes that, as a community, at least in my lifetime, I was certainly not familiar with. So Ophelia, I would love to hear how that experience of quarantine COVID-19 and all of that kind of came about for you.
So how did COVID-19 affect me? Well, we're under a president that is a racist, and called it the China flu virus. And so it set a tone already. But what I was most appalled was the fact that I thought I had these friends who were then they felt they were allowed to come out with every racist joke possible. And I have released those people, but it was a dog whistle that gave them the golden ticket to really release who they are. And these are people I knew, and I stood next to them and I thought, really? So all this time I've been talking to you and been with you, you feel comfortable with me enough to make these jokes and think that you're looking at me to think, hey, that was really funny, right? So that was the most appalling part, was that this whole isolation has exposed a lot of people for who they really are. And I'm very disappointed in that. I haven't made the effort to educate them because, to me, I have better things to do. Right? Maybe I should, but at that point it was just, really, I'm spitting in the wind. So that part was the business. It was a revealer. It really shone a light on some people, that it gave them license to be who they really are, because they saw it around them and they saw it in the news and they thought, well, if that person can say that, I totally can say that to you too. So that's the biggest nugget that came out of this whole thing, is the license to be a racist, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, wow, that's so true. And if anything, that's what the last few weeks have taught me as well. Going through, witnessing all of what's been going on in our country. Absolutely. Sabo, NorCal, I know I haven't had a lot of conversations with folks out there, but I did see, especially on Nextshark, a lot of coverage on Asian specific hate crimes at the beginning of coronavirus and throughout. So I'd love if you could maybe share some of that story from your experience.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And for those that know me, they know like I'm a jujitsu nut. So I've always been really wanting to test like my jujitsu skills. And I was like, oh shit, with coronavirus and what people are saying, I may get a chance to test them out right now. But, I have a 4-year-old and I have a 9-year-old. And what I really love about having kids is like, well, all the stupid stuff I would have done if I was single, I definitely wouldn't do because I have kids. And, what I really love about what Keiko said is, well, we're humans first. We classified Asians as a race, but ultimately we're all humans first. And when I looked at a lot of these people, because trust me, I feel very much the same as like Ophelia, like once the first like Asian kind of insult came out, I saw like so many other people willing to say these things. And it's like kind of really hurtful when you see people that that you respect, that you like, say these things. And, ultimately what I've come to realize is, everyone's looking for someone to blame, for this virus. And what I've really tried to do is just to have more love in my heart for these people. Like in many ways, I just feel bad for them, to have those things come out of their mouths. And for a lot of these people, and I've traveled a lot as well. I've traveled to a lot of different places and, a lot of red states. And I've connected with a lot of people that were actually Trump supporters as well. And what I've come to realize is, if you understand their upbringing and you understand, that they grew up in a homogenous area, that's all that they know. It's not their fault for not knowing. And us living on the coast where it's very multicultural, I heard something um, your biology is your firmware and your culture is your software. So, like I feel like living in San Francisco, if culture is your software, then I had so many different types of software programmers showing me like the diversity of life, whereas these homogenous areas and, kind of looking at it this way where a lot of their upbringing and a lot of the things that they were told and how it shapes them, it's given me more ability to not be angry at them, but to better understand why they think the way that they do. And once I understand the way that they think, it's much easier to have a conversation with them. And as Raj agreed, I was very good at being like a chameleon. So, I'll just eat like hot dogs or steak and potatoes with them and, skip like the sushi or the bulgogi or the kimchi, and just show them, like, I'm just like as American as you. I know what NASCAR is. I know a lot of these like, like, very American things. And, once they start seeing like someone different than them, someone different looking than them, have all these same kind of attributes, I think it really opens up their eyes. And ultimately, like I'm the type of guy, like I love to read up on like so many things and then utilize like information to try to overwhelm someone and just show them like, like here's all the proof. This is why I'm correct. And what I realized was facts and logic, it doesn't work on people whose minds are like made up about something else. And what you really need to do is tap into their heart. And how do you tap into their heart? You acknowledge them. You acknowledge that their experiences and the way they grew up is valid. They've seen their relatives, uncles, aunties lose jobs to immigrants. Even though their logic isn't right, it's still what they're feeling. And I found that once you acknowledge their feelings, you could have a conversation with them. And sometimes like Ophelia, I just don't have the energy for that shit. I'm just like, I can't deal with it. But, more often than not, I really try. And, with the good herb gives me more patience. And what I like to say is, whether you're red or blue, everyone seems to love green. So I really love to build bridges utilizing, this sacred plant and really trying to help people understand I'm not so scary. And now that I understand your viewpoint, it's not so scary to me either, because, before I started understanding that, I was like, well, why would people be anti-immigration? All of us are immigrants. These guys are such hypocrites. And then I hear stories that, they had a sister or an auntie or a mom, get raped by an illegal immigrant. And that's why they have these like visions and stories and opinions of what they are like, and that's where I really just try to, instead of telling more, just try to understand more and try to have more room in my heart for more diversity of thought and to really understand, those that live on the coast or live in diverse areas. We had more software engineers programming us with like more applications to deal with the real world. And these guys just had one programmer. And in a way, it just gives me so much empathy, so much sympathy for them, because I'm like, dude, you guys are just eating hot dogs, hamburgers, and mac and cheese over and over and over again. Maybe you guys throw in some Salisbury steak every once in a while, but we're here eating something different every single day of the week for a month, and those are the things that really make me realize I am kind of privileged to be in this situation. The privilege of having so many other different types of mindsets, so many different types of ideologies to help shape me to be a better understanding, a more compassionate person.
So I love everything that you said. I want to summarize it with saying you shared such wisdom in empathy, so much empowerment using empathy. And I saw somebody in the comments talking about having more of like a recent reconnection with the concept of empathy overall and really discovering what that is. And I think the way that you articulated that from a felt experience standpoint makes complete sense, right? So thank you so much for sharing that. And the other thing that Kat mentioned in the comments is building a green bridge. I'm like, that's genius. I love that. So thanks for sharing that piece. Raj, all the way out there in DC, I feel like that's a big spot for a lot of the things that we're talking about, huh? So why don't we talk a little bit about how you experienced those initial days of quarantine all the way, up to now?
Yeah, sure. I mean, like for me personally, I have been primarily working from home for a while, so it was not the most difficult transition for me, I guess, to kind of, on a personal level at least, to be more in the house. I will definitely say that, in alignment with what Sabo said, there was a lot of an uptick. It was kind of a tangible uptick, in, like, even if you didn't think for sure that the virus was like from China, it was like, why is it being brought up? Like, is it from China? You know what I mean? Like, people that were not even ready to go all the way were still like questioning it. And I think that speaks to like the power of the people that are in office and the people that are in government to set the influence, which is something that is super underrated in my opinion. But anyway, that was something that I noticed that I definitely could relate to. But as far as the like my experience with coronavirus, I mean, yeah, I think it's just being part of the broader Asian community, and things aren't going well with coronavirus in Pakistan or India. Like, I was just reading the other day about cases surging in Pakistan. Like, it's not something that anybody around the world, I would argue, is really dealing super well with. But I think, when you have a group in leadership that puts the blame on a certain nationality or a certain ethnicity, like, that just makes it really difficult to bring everybody together and create unity. So yeah, I mean, that is my whole take on it, I guess, is just that, unfortunately, the United States doesn't have a unified front as regards to what the origin is, like how we're going to handle it, how we're going to, address it. But hopefully with like events like these and panelists like everybody here and the folks that are attending and in the chat, we can, kind of move beyond that and still be in solidarity with each other, and also through organizations like the MCBA. And I urge everybody to check us out at minoritycannabis.org if you're interested in minority representation in the cannabis industry. But yeah, I don't think that we have a huge assist from the official bodies right now. So I think it's going to come down to channels like this and channels like other ones that are authentic and in the community to really lead the way in expressing the voice and showing that it's not just, we're not separate, we're involved and we are also a group in America that stands in solidarity with everybody else that is being persecuted, and also ourselves have been persecuted as well. So
Actually, I turned the camera on, Raj, because I didn't want to say there is one country doing it right, and it's New Zealand, because they don't have any.
So right, yeah.
Okay, and I'm going to go in the background, but I did want to just say that one thing.
You're right. Absolutely. Yes.
No, and actually that's a great segue to the question that we're going to close out on, which is really that, Raj, what I heard you say is that there's a bit of a bid for connection, a call to action of some sorts around conversations and panels like this. And I'd have to say, Ophelia, with your Asian Americans in cannabis education platform, that's been so foundational, I think, for our community. So with the, no pressure or anything, but with the question of, what's next and how can we follow the call to action that Raj just shared and come together and support one another, what's your 2 cents on what's next and how we can actually follow through with that?
Drop the veils and listen. Basically, we just have to listen. And just, I think it's just basically listen. Like I'm listening to Keiko, and Sabo has made me realize that I can be a grump, and and I can be dismissive at times and just say, I'm done. I'm not going to do this. But really, it is doing what they do, is listen and then give something back, and then giving and receiving. So it is that, and just dropping all the personal issues. It's not about me. It's not about them. It's the bigger issue. And what I learned from Keiko and Raj and Sabo today is to listen. So that's my last bit.
Thank you so much for that. And Keiko, as a pioneer of the Asian American community in cannabis, teach us, what can we be doing better to lift each other up?
Well, like I said earlier, someplace where we all get together and pass it to the left-hand side, that makes a great difference. Overall, though, I think just keeping an open heart, open mind, and open spirit to the possibilities in the future that this will get deschedulized for our country and for the whole world, that they can be able to see that cannabis is a good medicine and it can be a great space and great place for business and industry development. And let's try and bring all our brothers and sisters with us, along with everyone else, because it has the potential to join us together. And, I feel very fortunate. I mean, I'm the director of education for a cannabis resort that focuses on health and wellness education in Jamaica. So I'm pretty fortunate. It took a long time to get there, but I want to invite all of you to come down to Coral Cove as well and experience that. So we'll maybe we should have a Asian of Cannabis Week at Coral Cove in the future.
Perfect.
I'm down.
Perfect.
I'm in.
I'm there. We absolutely
I'm
plug
definitely
it.
in.
Rico, book it. Canada Gather, Jamaica.
Interesting thing about Jamaica, they've only had 600 cases of COVID and only 10 people have passed away, and they took it really hard on the 10 people. And so as I touch my heart here, I really want to touch my heart for the future of us all being integrated and accepted in the future of cannabis in the whole world. So I have a lot of hope. And so if I hope can have our hopes of green and our green bridges, as Kat suggested, is what I would like to envision, and just reach out and have us all come together. And I really want to thank you for your time and knowing that I really feel we can do this. So I'll get a date together for Coral Cove for us, okay?
Sold. Rico will be putting that on the calendar. We'll be
Okay,
right there.
yeah.
No problem. Perfect. And Sabo, you're making us all look so good in the Asian American community, because everybody here knows that you're absolutely crushing the game. So I'm going to pretend like I'm part of that somehow, like, just whatever I can take. Just kidding. Anyway, Sabo, congratulations again on such an incredible launch today. So with that, knowing that, I want to hear from you and your wisdom of empathy, your wisdom of entrepreneurship, and talk to me a little bit about what you envision being the next step as we continue to lift each other up in the Asian American community in cannabis.
Yeah, it's interesting, kind of, we've all heard that cannabis is a gateway drug. And, when I was younger in the 80s, it meant it's a gateway to like crack and heroin and all these other harder drugs. And what I realized, it's actually a gateway drug to a more fulfilling life. And, we talked about, biology being your firmware and culture being your software. And, for many people that aren't able to travel or don't have the opportunity to be in multicultural situations, I don't think this is controversial anymore. Maybe it is controversial, but, just come to Oakland. You could find some plant medicines there, psilocybin, ayahuasca, iboga. If you can't travel, this is a great way to get a different perspective. And I'm not telling people just to take this willy-nilly. You got to go into this taking it very seriously, working with a shaman or a clinician, and really understanding what you are trying to get out of this experience. But I found that for the Asian American community, especially with my generation and older, like talking about feelings, talking about repressed memories, talking about traumatic events is not something that is interesting, or not interesting. It's just, like every time I tried to display emotions to my relatives, it made them uncomfortable, and what I've come to realize is I found a few Mandarin speaking shamans that could actually work with Asians in the community, and having assisted them through some of these journeys and seeing the impact that it's made. It's not just their lives that are improved, but when you are able to tap into the vulnerable side of you and express it to the world unapologetically, you're not the only one that benefits. Everyone benefits. Like I could say for my wife and my daughters, being much more vulnerable and open allowed me to connect with them in ways that I couldn't before, because I used to think I had to be the provider, I had to be the alpha male, I had to be all these things that they never asked me to be, but it was kind of ingrained into me based on our culture. And I think the Asian American culture, or the Asian culture in general, a lot of us tie our happiness based on how many goals that we've hit in life. So we have a bunch of young kids that are professional goal setters and goal hitters, but none of these goals are their own. They're not ones that make them happy. And ultimately, what I found is if people do more things that make them happy, there's less conflict. There's less of this mudslinging on Facebook. I mean, when you see a lot of these things, then you think about, who has the time to get involved in all of these things, and then you start realizing if you're really happy with yourself and your life, you could look at these comments and not be triggered at all. And I'm not saying I'm there, because I still get triggered. I still get triggered a lot. But, there are times when I remember some of the lessons that I've learned from the journey, and I could look at these comments and start realizing, these people have different backgrounds and upbringings. And by having more empathy for them and understanding, it's made my life a whole lot easier. And it's made discussions with everyone, not just Asians, Caucasians, African Americans, Latinos, all of them, and when we could bridge those gaps, I envision a future where we're all kind of like this light caramel skinned race, and there's no division. And the only division is how good of a person you are, not what type of person you are. So sorry for rambling a little there, but that's where I kind of see could most benefit the Asian community. And I'm trying to find someone to translate Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, into Mandarin, so that those that really need to hear and read those things, could understand that even a respected author like Michael Pollan is looking into psychedelics because mental health has not improved since the 60s, where it was single-digit success rates. And here we are in 2020, still single-digit success rates, more people on anti-anxiety pills, more people on antidepressants. But guess what? GDP is higher than ever. Apple is going to be the first $1 trillion company. By all these KPIs and metrics, society's doing better. But we're measuring the wrong thing. And that's why I think psychedelics is the next phase.
I'm like busy trying to clap and get my AirPods charged at the same time. You just touched on things that are so close to my work that now I have to plug it because you tossed it up. So first things, if you want to do a panel on psychedelics, drop a comment here, Instagram, and one of the things, because I feel like that is what I'm hearing is coming organically out of this program. That was actually a goal for Raj and the MCBA and CannaGather.
And I just want to say that in Jamaica, psilocybin is completely legal. So I have a lot of education programs already at Coral Cove on psychedelics.
Panel 2. What I'm so excited about this thing. We're going to continue. The second plug that I want to make, other than the psychedelic thing, is you did not say this, so I am going to, because I don't know, Sabo, if you're into this kind of stuff, but I am so into trauma-informed psychology. So the work of Bessel van der Kolk and him recently just having a trauma conference and specifically about the usage of psilocybin for his patients and in his clinical work. Gabor Mate, huge on all of the things that you talked about. I'm a huge fan of his. And then of course, Peter Levine, somatic experiencing, connecting mind, body. I mean, Keiko, you're in your health and wellness resort. I mean, somatic experiencing, mind, body connection
purpose, intuition, all the things that Sabo just touched on is like that is honestly, I just feel like the biggest link to endocannabinoid system and trauma-informed psychology. Like, Sabo, you gave me the opportunity to say it, so now I'm going to. Thank you. And so, Raj, we've got 6 minutes. I want you to close this out because you are the rep from the MCBA. And so, like I said, big reason for me, even thank you to Rico kind of giving me this opportunity to host today was because I wanted this conversation to go exactly how it went. And so, Raj, please share with us what the next steps are going to be as part of the MCBA work.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. No pressure at all, right? Just close out this amazing discussion. No, thank you, everybody. First of all, thank you, everybody, for attending. Everybody that signed up and RSVP'd to listen. Thank you to everybody on the panel, Sabo, Ophelia, Keiko, Michelle, thank you for putting everything together. Rico in the background, thank you for working the technical side. This has been awesome. Next steps, just get more involved. If you're out there and you are an Asian person in cannabis and you want to be more in the industry and you want to get more involved, hit us up. You're here with the organizers of one of the bigger chapters of CannaGather. We need more representation. That's one of the whole points of this entire thing, is that there's not enough people in the Asian community that are representative of the folks that are in the industry and doing it and working to achieve the goals of the broader industry. We're not shedding enough light on those stories. So at the MCBA, we definitely want to do that. Check us out, minoritycannabis.org, @minoritycannabis on Instagram. Visit us there, and we're going to be doing a ton of events this year, more involved with all types of communities in cannabis. And hopefully we can continue to carve out a voice for Asian American folks that are in the space. And again, like I say, the last thing I'll leave you with is just a challenge. If you are an Asian American person or an Asian person in cannabis and you want to get more involved, do it. Hit us up. Take action.
Thank you.
How about,
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Kat.
I was going to say, how about this panel? You guys did great. This is absolutely wonderful, guys. This is so dope. And I don't want to be Me Tooism over here, because I hate when people do that. But my great uncle, the patriarch from our family, he died last month. And we got to see a little bit of our genealogy. And I'm actually 1/16 Chinese. A crazy.
Oh.
So I'm a Blasian too. So.
Blasian.
Welcome, Rico.
No, but yeah, shout out, because that's because of the Panama Canal. We're all super mixed up from Panama. But great job. I'm gonna check out right now, but I'm putting in the chats right here a free link for everybody for this weekend. Come show support. We got lots of Asian folks, lots of white folks, lots of brown, black. Everybody's coming out this weekend to join and talk about the big economic comeuppance of the cannabis industry and how we need more people of color involved. It is less than 20% non-white ownership in the industry, 4.3% black, 10.7% Latin of Latin descent, and UN and the World Health Organization are in December voting on global decriminalization. So let's get more diversity in this thing before it takes off globally. Much love, everybody, and I'll see you guys next Thursday. Hopefully I'll see you on Saturday, but if not, next week. All right, guys.
And closing out, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you
you so much.
Bye, Sabo.
Everyone, I love you all.
Everybody wear
See you
your
guys.
masks. Be safe.
Yes.
Wash your